So my name is Kitty Berry, and I'm the Assistant Director of Options for Independent Living. And Sue Primo is our brand new Executive Director. She's been on the job 9 days. So very new. Yeah. We welcome her. Allison Windle is from Options also with in our Appleton office as an IL coordinator, and Stacy Scheibe with Options as an IL coordinator, dementia specialist, and does a lot of things. So yes, but we just wanted to say welcome. We're really delighted that you're here. We had hoped to be able to host this at our office, but actually we're really glad that that didn't happen because we can only hold about 20 people. So we're really, really happy that there's so many people participating. One of the things I like to do is try to have people meet other folks. So take this opportunity to network and enjoy the training. And I wanted to thank Lisa and Mickey for all your efforts in getting this organized and hosting this. And there is one more training coming up in August, I believe, over in the Eau Claire area. So looking forward to that. We brought some of our brochures and pens. People like our pens, so please feel free to take those with you. So anyway, again, welcome, and the restrooms are just out the door to the right, and enjoy the day.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Sobchak, and I am supervisor with the Office for Physical Disabilities and Independent Living. Welcome. Sorry that there were some delayed responses. We had some staffing changes in the middle of this training, so I promise we will be more responsive for the next training. We're just trying to get some more staff support. The next training flyer hopefully will be out in the next week or two. That training has a pre-session. August 21st, we're going to be looking at Toby. What's the other one, Cindy? And Open Sesame, and looking at some technical issues related to those. We're going to be having some vendors come and talk through those the day before. You don't have to go to that session. We just thought it would be easier to tag it on to the next training. And then the next training will be focused on transition age youth and how do we get them to transition from Google Chromebooks into Microsoft Office. That seems to be a very big struggle for some of them. How do we get them to ask for job accommodations? Because in the school setting, they're used to those being provided for them, and they don't necessarily know how to advocate for themselves or ask for those services. And then we have Rob Carr coming from Oklahoma, which I'm really excited about. He's an expert in accessibility for web and Word and Office. And he's going to be coming to do some introductory work with us on that. That's an area we haven't focused on as much and want to also start getting some IL staff and others in the state skilled up on, because there can't just be a few people of us in the state working on that issue because it's such a huge issue. So as Kitty said, restrooms are out there to the back. We got everyone's allergy, etc. dealt with, but if something comes up or you need something, please feel free to flag me or Mickey down. Just also being mindful if we're doing questions or discussion, saying who you are, because we have CART going over here and interpreters over here on this side of the room. And also just being sensitive to other people's disabilities so that they can also be participating in discussion. I think that's about it for today. So if you have any questions, again, feel free to flag Mickey or me down. Other than that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Abby and Mike.
All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. And then Mike's got his device mic'd, but when he starts talking, we'll make sure that you can hear him as well, and if we need to, we can adjust the volume. So we're going to be talking today about the basics of augmentative and alternative communication. And so we weren't sure where everybody's level of familiarity is, so we kind of start at a very basic level and then work into some of the logistics of AAC, and we're hoping to leave a fair amount of time at the end for some discussion. So we'll start with Mike introducing himself.
My name is Mike Hipple. I live in Appleton, Wisconsin. I started Wisconsin Augmentative Alternative Communication AAC Network in 2014. I'm the membership director for United States Society of AAC. I eat and breathe AAC.
All right. I think that's very true of Mike and of myself, that we're here to talk about this topic because we're really passionate about it. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin with both my bachelor's and master's degrees in speech and language pathology, and I have focused on AAC ever since. I worked at the Communication Aids and Systems Clinic and the Communication Development Program at the Waisman Center, and I just have loved every minute of it. So I'm really excited to be here with Mike talking to you guys about this topic. So for our agenda, Mike and I were kind of talking about what's the best way to break down the basics, and we thought kind of doing the what, where, when, who, how questions and answering those in regards to AAC. So that's the kind of the path we'll follow today. So I'm going to start by talking about what AAC is from kind of the logistics side, and then Mike's going to tell you more about his system specifically. So I put this in the slides just so that people have the definition of what AAC is from ASHA. I won't read it to you, but the idea is that anything that you use to communicate apart from speech is considered AAC. So this can be things like sign language. This can be things like communication devices. And we'll delve a little bit more into some examples of those with some videos, because I think users can show you, like Mike, and we have some videos of other users, can show you what AAC is a lot better than I can stand and tell you. But what I want to start out with is just a basic overview of the different types of AAC systems. So there are low-tech systems such as communication boards and symbols, all the way up to high-tech fancy devices. But one thing we always like to point out as we talk about these different types is that there isn't a hierarchy. When you're thinking about AAC, somebody doesn't have to start with and master low-tech symbols before they move on to a mid-tech voice output device, before they move on to a really high-tech complex device. You match the system to the person's needs based on their access and their language. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the different systems. So I like to start with no technology AAC. So this is something that everybody can start using immediately with clients. If you're an AAC user, if you're a family member, these are things we all do every day when we communicate. So we use our facial expressions, we use our posture, our head nods and shakes, we use gestures and pointing, and all of those things are communicative strategies. Another one that I like to talk about in talks like this is partner-assisted scanning, because this is a strategy you guys could take home and start using with someone today. And the idea behind this strategy is if you have somebody who doesn't have a consistent way to even indicate, like, yes, that's what I wanted to say, this is a strategy where you help them indicate a yes by offering choices, and then they respond with a signal that tells you, that's the one I want. So the example I like to use when we're talking to adult crowds is wine. So if I couldn't communicate and Mike was asking me, what kind of wine do you want to have? Do you want white wine or red wine? And maybe my signal is that I look right in his eyes when he says the one that I want. So I might be looking down and he's saying, do you want white wine? And I'm looking down because I don't want white wine. And then he pauses for a few seconds and then says, well, do you want red wine? And then I look at him to let him know that's the one. So this is a really cool strategy that you guys could start using immediately. The trick is to figure out what input method helps the communicator understand what you're offering. So is it speech or signs or visuals? But then once you start presenting those choices, the second thing is figuring out how are they going to signal when you got the one they want. So they might touch your hand, they might touch a button. If they don't have as great use of their hands, they might move their head or look at you. So you guys can be thinking about this strategy and people that it might work for and how you might use it in your work. And then we talk about low-tech symbols and boards. I think probably a lot of people have seen and are familiar with these. They can be individual symbols. They can be in books and boards. So rather than me going to a lot of depth about these, I have two videos of two different boards. One of them is a symbol-based board that a child is using, so we'll play that first. And then the second one is an adult who uses a text-based board. So when you watch the kiddo, you'll notice that his partner is really important. His mom is there helping figure out what he's saying, but he really has a lot of independence in communicating.
Ice cream shop?
Sorry, I just tried to push volume and it didn't help. I'll just play it again.
Oh, good
So first he said
choice.
ice
We were
cream
just
shop.
talking about
How do you want to
cake.
get to the ice cream shop today?
Looks like our text is a little
Do
behind.
you want to go in the car or do you want to walk? You want to go in the car? Okay. There's some other choices that you could do. You want to go in any of these to the chocolate shop, the ice cream shop? You want to stand up? Oh. Do you like to stand up at the counter and look at all the ice creams?
Uh-oh. So it looks like our text got a little bit behind the video, but the idea was that he was able to tell where he wanted to go to the ice cream shop. He was able to tell how he wanted to get there by driving in the car. And then he was also able to initiate something he wanted to comment on, which was he said stand, and then his mom interpreted that to mean, do you want to stand at the counter where you can see all the ice creams? And he was excited about that. So now we'll play the one with the adult user, and hopefully our audio will line up this time.
Remember?
That was not fun, it sounds like.
U S H. Oh, show you how? No, S H. Yeah, show you how. I. You could do it. Do you have time? Not. Not really.
So the last part is she responds by saying, not really. Like, no, nobody has time to do a whole bunch. But what they were talking about was creating a new page in her book. And what I want to point out here is that a lot of times people think of low-tech systems as really simple and a starting point, but you can see from this board that this isn't simple at all. Each square has about 5 words in it, or a letter and 4 words. And what's great about the board is if you have a communication partner who's really familiar with the board, you can be super efficient, because based on the sentence you're constructing, you don't have to point right at the exact word within the square, but they can guess which of those 4 words you mean based on the context of the sentence that you're building. And so this is a great example of a low-tech system that still can accomplish really a lot of complex communication. Oops. Oh, maybe I'll do that next time. Maybe that'll make it work. The next group we talk about is Midtech Systems. And often when I talk about these, I kind of talk about them as a learning strategy and not an end goal. With low-tech systems, or mid-tech systems, it's really easy to make great messages for participation. For example, you could record a message that a kiddo says when he gets to school to tell his friends or his teachers about what he did over the weekend, or same thing, you could program something at school so he can tell his parents what he did during the day when he gets home. But the trouble with these devices, did you want to say something, Mike? Do you want to compose it while I'm, okay. The trouble with these devices is they don't offer a path to language development. So kids can learn to participate using these, but they don't learn how would I construct that exact same sentence if I wanted to say it spontaneously and if nobody around me guessed that that was what I wanted to say. So these are a wonderful teaching tool, and they have their place in terms of efficient communication and participation, but we often also are looking at using something more like either those low-tech boards or a communication device like Mike's that offer us that pathway to language and more independent initiation of communication. Mike, is it okay if I play the next video while you're getting your message ready? Yeah? Okay. So this is a video of that same kiddo who was using the low-tech board, but this time he's using this Midtech device to tell a joke.
Knock, knock. Who's there? Oh, is it Miss Emily's turn?
Who's there?
Gorilla.
Gorilla who?
Gorilla cheese sandwich, and I'll be right over.
Uh-oh, the punchline is gorilla cheese sandwich, and I'll be right over. So here's a great example of how this same kiddo can use his low-tech device to do, or his low-tech board to do a lot of great communication. He can use his mid-tech device to be a great participant, use that really power, that power of communication. But then he also has a high-tech device that he controls with his eye gaze. So he uses all three versions, and he's a very competent and wonderful communicator. Before I go on to the next, I'm going to let Mike finish because his message is related to these mid-tech devices. So there'll just be a pause while he gets his message ready.
Or you can use it when news to you.
You can use it as like a news to you function. So a lot of communication devices, is that what you mean, Mike? The communication devices have that news to you function. So yeah, that's a great point Mike is making. So that same idea of recording a message that you can share news on a button, a lot of communication devices also have a way to do that. So it kind of combines the best of both worlds where the user can be creating their message word by word, and then they can also have these stored kind of full phrase efficient messages as well. Is that what you were talking about? Okay, great. Cool. So the next set that we're going to talk about are high-tech devices. Mike, do you want to get back to your notebook so you're ready to talk about yours? Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the different types of devices, and then Mike's going to describe how his works so you can get an idea, and then he said he's happy to have you guys take a look at it after too. So high-tech devices come in a lot of different forms, and I think the big takeaway that we hope everybody figures or learns today is that there are dedicated systems that only are used for communication. And so Mike's device is an example of that. This device was designed for communication. These devices can often access internet and email, but the part that makes them fundable through medical insurance, like Medicaid, Medicare, and some private insurances, is the fact that they're locked into that communication piece. So that's how these devices fit the definition of durable medical equipment and are fundable. There are lots of off-the-shelf technologies now being developed for communication. So I think everybody's aware of iPads and tablets that can have communication apps on them, but those are not fundable through insurance because they're not locked into just the communication function. That's not to say that those can't be funded in other ways. Often people will work with their funding agencies to figure out if they can get a grant for something like that, or they can use long-term care dollars for something like that. But just to know that there is a difference between the devices that are fundable through insurance and the devices that are not. But typically a speech-generating device includes a dynamic display. So what that means is when you choose words, it links to additional words that help you build sentences and construct messages. The other advantage that these have over low-tech systems is that they can be changed easily and they have an infinite amount of space for words and messages. So with a communication board, you're kind of limited to whatever you put on it, and anytime you need new words, it has to be updated. But these guys can be updated and changed easily with the touch of a button. One of the things we won't go super in depth about, but we want to make sure we point out is about the different language features of devices. So all devices are very different. The people who have developed them have used a lot of research to figure out different ways to support communication on an augmentative communication device. But because of the major differences, different devices might work differently for different people. So when Mike talks about his history and learning to use AAC, he talks about a situation where he was provided with a device that wasn't a great match for what he needed, and so it looked like he couldn't use it, but it wasn't him, it was that the device wasn't appropriately matched. So I think what we want you to take away from this is that an evaluation to look at what is the setup and the presentation and what visual supports are needed and what access supports are needed. So that's where we get into these access features. How is the person going to access the device if they can't touch it directly with their hands? That's the biggest takeaway we want you guys to have from today, is that that feature match is so important to make sure that the system is the right tool for the communicator and that they've gotten help and support to learn how to use it functionally. So we're not just handing them a system and saying, go forth, communicate. We're really providing support for it too. Yeah. So now, to give you an idea of what these different access features are, we again have videos, and I hope, I don't know, if it doesn't line up, I'll just keep kind of narrating the end. But this will show you what the different strategies are. So if you or if somebody you work with has any kind of motor or vision impairment, hearing impairment, you know, the physical impairments, there are lots of ways for us to figure out the best, easiest access for them to a communication system. So the first one is a keyguard. So this is still touching with your finger, but there's a little plexiglass piece that helps guide where you're pointing so you don't, your other parts of your hand don't bump the screen. So we'll show you with this guy.
I want.
You can read or play. You can listen to music.
To listen to.
Good choice. What song should we sing? Try again. One finger.
Wheels on the bus.
Okay, let me
Good
get the iPad and we
choice.
can listen.
So the part that it cut off is him saying, wheels on the bus. And then she's saying, okay, I'm going to go get the iPad and we'll listen to Wheels on the Bus. So here you can see that his hand wasn't always really precise, but overall he was able to communicate his message efficiently without a bunch of mishits given that keyguard. This strategy is called Auditory Fishing, and it also utilizes a keyguard, but in this situation it's created for somebody who has vision impairment, but they can hear, and so it will provide an auditory cue as she moves across the screen, and then when she hears the one she wants, she presses again.
Activities. Needs. People. Feelings.
Let me tell you how I feel.
So you can hear that it's a different voice when it's the spoken message.
Sad. Happy. Tired.
I'm tired.
Yeah, so in this case, the user didn't necessarily need to see, but could slide the hand across, and then when they got to the message, speak it out loud. There are devices, too, where that auditory cue can be through a headphone. So I have a couple of users who use the auditory cues, but nobody else can hear the cues except them, and then when they speak the full message, then it comes out through the speakers of the device. A stylus is another thing that most people are probably familiar with. So I'll show this video. This gal could use her hands pretty well, but she would just go for the device with her whole hand all the time. So we were having a really hard time discriminating what she actually wanted. So here's a great example of that.
Good job. Teeth.
Teeth.
One little finger, one little finger, one little
They also chose this song for
finger,
therapy
tap,
to
tap,
target her
point your finger
pointing
up,
a finger.
point your finger down, put it by your teeth. Isn't that silly?
That's a funny one.
Yeah. Should we try it again? We can sing one little finger. You try. Good job. What next? Teeth. Teeth again?
So it'll cut off the part where she actually used the stylus again, but hopefully you guys have familiarity with how that works. This one is cool. This is a joystick, and so a joystick is similar to how Mike's device navigates, except for his joystick is in his head array, and he'll tell more about that. But in a joystick situation, it's like a mouse on a computer, so he can go directly to the message he wants, and then it activates based on how long he lets it sit on the message.
Do you remember that message you saved on your school page? What will your job be?
So you have to go out, and we'll see if we can find where you put that last week. You made a message about what you're going to do when you graduate. Oh, you want to finish
My birthday is October 25th, 1995.
Yeah, you're proud of that one. Because you're going to be 21 years old, aren't you? That's what he told me when he first came in.
I'm going to be 21.
Yeah.
So you can see as it moves across, it highlights which square he's on, and then that blue circle that's shrinking tells him how long he has to leave it there before it'll activate the message. So he doesn't have to push a button to activate it, which is good for his motor control.
On there, does it say what you're going to do after you graduate from high school? Do you see where that one is?
After school, I will work at Leopold Elementary School. I work in library.
Yeah, so the final message that doesn't get captioned is that he's going to work at an elementary school in a library when he graduates from high school, and he was really proud and excited about that. He's a book guy. All right, and then this is the last video, or second to last video of an access method. This one is eye gaze. So technology for eye gaze has advanced significantly in the past 2 years about. Not only have the cameras gotten better at kind of reading where the user's eyes are, but they also have gotten more specific in terms of like people who do have, if your eyes don't line up perfectly, you can track a single eye, or even like the settings related to how quickly it moves with your eyes and things like that have really advanced. So the camera is better and the functions are better, and we're seeing a lot of people who in the past have not been able to use eye gaze are now able to use it. Yeah. So here's a video of a gal using her system.
Are you looking at my iPad? Would you like to listen to some more music? That would be fun, wouldn't it? Can I show you where those were?
I want.
So again, you can see as she looks, the little red circle starts to appear, and then she has to hold until the whole circle forms for it to activate the message.
Story.
Tell me that whole sentence.
I want to read story.
Okay, then we're going to put the iPad away, okay? And I will go get a book.
Yeah, so at the very end, the last bit was she just looked up at the top bar where she had constructed the sentence, I want to read story, and then it spoke the full message for her. So this is another example of that language development piece. There was no way she would have been able to say that if we had programmed a button, because our clinician thought she wanted to listen to music on the iPad, and she was able to change that plan. The last access strategy we want to talk about is scanning, and we won't go super in depth because it is complex, but we want to make sure people know that even if you or somebody you work with can't directly access a system by pointing with a stylus, with their eyes, there is a scanning strategy where they can use buttons. And so in this strategy, the device presents the options, and you just wait, similar to that partner-assisted scanning. The user waits until it gets to the message they want, and then they activate it. The two options for this are two-switch scanning, where the user controls the speed. So one button, let's say Mike's, can I use your headrest as an example? Okay, so if Mike's was scanning, he might have this side of his device move through the choices, and if he turns his head this way, it would activate the moving, and then he might have this side set up to activate the message. So he could control how quickly he goes through each option and then chooses. The second option is auto scan, or one switch scanning. So in that situation, he would push one button, the device would start presenting the choices at a timed interval, and when it got to the message he wanted, he would push the button again to choose it. So the big reason we bring this up is just to make sure everybody's aware that even if you have a very complex sensory or motor profile, you could still use AAC to communicate. And there are some resources for scanning on here. Then this just kind of talks about what we were talking about with like Mike's head array, with a hand switch, with a foot switch. There are switches that can activate by a vocalization, which is what the video will show. There are switches that activate by sipping or puffing. You know, a wheelchair can be driven by like sucking or blowing, and those switches can also be used for accessing a communication device. So that's the other piece of this is switches have advanced to a really high level where you can really find a lot of options for somebody.
When we were at Closing the Gap, Mike tried a switch where it just activates with any active muscle. So it was a company out of Australia, just a twitch would be enough to activate it. It was really cool.
Nice. So a tiny muscle movement would activate that twitch. They call it the twitch switch, which is a tongue twister. And here are just some pictures of what those switches can look like. Lots of different button types. There are different shapes, sizes, different amounts of pressure needed. A really cool one that we're using a lot now is the candy corn switch by Attainment Company, and it's got it's a proximity switch. So you don't have to have any pressure, you just have to get close to it. So there's a lot of options out there for the scanning. So I'll show you this video of our guy. He's not actually using his switch for communication in this video, but I think what's cool is he shows how advanced he is in using scanning, because he's actually using it to play Angry Birds, and he plays it better than I do with being able to access it with my finger. So you'll see, yeah, it will be hard to follow when the timing is off, but when it gets to what he wants, he just says, and the switch picks up that sound, and that's what activates it. So I put little stars on the corner for when he's activating it, but the timing won't be right, but you'll get the idea.
There you go.
So he actually lines the cursor up with the bird, tells the iPad to use the drag function to pull the bird back, uses the hit button to release the bird, and then it's the bird that stops in the middle and splits into 3 birds. So then he has to get the cursor over the bird again and activate it a second time, and then it splits into 3 birds. And he gets the whole, he wins the game in one try, and I'd use all the birds and not win. So he has really mastered using that scanning. And then he also uses the same scanning strategy for communication. Okay, so the last thing I just want to reiterate about Hightech Systems is the need for accessories. So when you think about a system for somebody, it's not just the device itself, but also the things you need to make it usable by that person. So Mike will talk more about the specifics of his entire system, but just thinking about mounts and cases and speakers and the things that need to be associated with the device in order for people to hear it, in order for Mike or like him to see it and use it, are all a part of the package. And when people get systems that are durable medical equipment, so they're funded through insurance, the entire system is part of the funding package. So we ask for the mounts, we ask for any access strategies, we ask for speakers and cases, we get all of it as a part of the package. And so when you think about iPads and tablets, that's another thing that can make those tricky. You can get exactly what you need for somebody because you can handpick the pieces, but it doesn't kind of come in that full package like the durable medical equipment devices do. So that's the last little bit I'll talk about related to the overview of what AAC is, and then Mike's going to talk more about his device and describe how he uses it.
I use my communication device for everything from telling people my needs, likes, and wants to letting the people who work with me know what I am thinking. My communication device is called AnyGo2. It is made by the Pranky Ramage company. I access through my head array system. It has an ASL box. You can take a look at my access system during lunch or any time. I also use my communication device to give speeches and to be a part of many conference calls and meetings. I can use the notebook setting on my communication device to write my speeches and play them when I'm at a conference or on a phone call. I also use quick squares that I made to play in different settings when I need to be fast when I'm talking to my friends and family, like, wow, what a game. Or I need to go somewhere now, goodbye.
Just a second while he gets back to his button.
The PRC has a great language system in Speak and Unity. How I build my sentences is interesting to watch. I pick a symbol which mean different kinds of words. Apple mean food and meal words. It can also mean be and busy. Different communication devices have different language systems. I have a friend who likes to say that it is like learning a foreign language. Unity. How I build my sentences is interesting to watch. I pick a symbol which mean different kinds of words. Apple mean food and meal words. It can also mean be and busy.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. I love what Mike said at the end about that learning a language system on a communication device can be like learning a foreign language. And so I think that segues well into starting to talk about who uses AAC and when to start using it, our next two questions that we'll respond to. So when we talk about who benefits from AAC, I think a really important fact that ASHA has been doing more and more research on is there are about 2 million Americans with severe communication impairments where speech and or handwriting does not meet their daily communication needs. So those 2 million people are all wonderful candidates for using AAC to support their communication. One thing we talk about a lot is that there isn't a standardized evidence-based procedure that identifies like you're an AAC user and you're not. It really comes down to offering the opportunity to learn, feature matching the systems to the person's needs, and then just going from there to identify what's helpful and what's not helpful, and really involving the user and their family and their team in making the decisions about what works best for them with AAC. But one thing I really like to point out is that a lot of times people think about AAC for this first group, people who have no speech, and they use AAC as their primary communication means, and then they kind of stop thinking about it from there. But we talk a lot about people who have some speech, and they use AAC as a supplement. So I have many clients, and Mike has probably met many people who have 5, 10, 50 functional spoken words that people can understand. But 50 words isn't enough for any of us to communicate about the vast majority of things that we want to say. And so for those people, AAC can act as a supplement to that speech. For people who have dysarthric speech, so they can speak like you or I, but maybe not as understandably or intelligibly, AAC can be used to repair breakdowns. So speech might be their go-to communication method, but if you don't understand what they're saying, then they use their device to help repair those breakdowns. And then people who are developing speech. So there are lots of children who are learning to talk, but they're delayed compared to their typically developing speaking peers. And AAC can really be used as a supplement to help them learn language and help them have a way to communicate and reduce frustration while their speech is developing and moving along. So to give you an example of some of the diagnoses and some of the populations that we work with and the service models, this is what our programs, these are the clients that our programs serve. So we see a wide variety, anybody, again, who can't meet all their communication needs using speech. We see all ages. Our service models are through our outpatient clinic where we do outpatient therapies, our CDP outreach program, which I'll tell a little bit more about in a bit. We also partner with UW Hospital, and we see inpatients who either have a long-term or temporary need. If they have a medical situation where they can't speak, even for a short term, we go over and help identify ways for them to communicate within their medical care. And then we also are part of the multidisciplinary clinics at the Waisman Center. So there's a Down syndrome clinic, there's a newborn follow-up clinic for premature infants who are at risk for developmental disabilities. The clinic that I work in is the cerebral palsy clinic. So these clinics are really focused on individuals and families who have specific needs and conditions, and we tailor the evaluations and treatments to that individual. Yeah, do you want to ask a question? That's a great question. So the question was whether we provide services with hospice and skilled nursing facilities. That is a tricky business because the way the funding works because we're an outpatient clinic, technically, we have to work out the funding directly with those hospice and skilled nursing facilities, and we have been working on partnering with some, but so far that's not a major area of our service, but we'd love to branch into that more. Yeah, absolutely.
When I'm not driving Mike around to speeches, I'm also a nursing home social worker, and we recently had a situation where we involved a gentleman with a diagnosis of CP that had a paperboard, but we wanted to see if we could advance into something a little more technical. So yeah, medical assistance is a funding source. We were able to get him an evaluation in several sessions to see if that was something that was appropriate. We determined that it wasn't, but his guardian, his brother, was very thankful that we just didn't assume because of his age we weren't going to look at that as an option for him. We took it that one step further just to make sure we weren't missing something for him.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think advocacy is one of the biggest, most important things related to this overall, advocating for the user and advocating for the funding. Did you have a question?
Very difficult to understand, and I understand that he desires to be independent, but I think he is frustrated and that's okay. Very, very difficult to understand.
Yeah.
But he's resistant to using it.
Okay.
So maybe just in the purpose of time, that'd be a question like at lunch. Maybe when that person could get together and you could identify some strategies for.
Would that work? Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, that's a great idea. So Mike that sounds great. And we should have time at the end for additional questions too. But if you guys, feel free to keep raising hands because I think it's really relevant to talk about it within the context. Are we trading? Oh, great. Oh, great. So she's going to walk around, and if you guys have questions, raise your hand and she'll bring the mic so that everybody can hear the questions. Thank you. All right. So again, here are some examples of people some specific diagnoses that we often will work with those individuals to use AAC, but these are not the end-all be-all. We've seen lots of people with lots of different diagnoses, and it's really just based on whether they have a need for a supplemental communication strategy.